Hello, Ladislas Morris from the wanderinginvestor.com. So today I'm in Istanbul in Turkey, and I am going to have a conversation with Keith, my real estate agent here. We're going to be discussing the latest developments in the real estate market in Istanbul following the devaluation. And he's also going to show us an apartment that he's busy renovating, and we're going to go through the numbers. So how much the apartment would cost right now in the current market conditions, how much one could expect in terms of rental income, then all the costs to get down to a net yield calculation. So we are in Kurtuluş. It's an area in the center of Istanbul, very close to Nişantaşı. It's a very residential area, but there are quite a few cute little cafes and stores and bars and restaurants. And we are going to go to the third floor of this building. All right, so here we are, and here is Keith, our friendly real estate agent from Nova Scotia, who's been living here in Turkey for a while. So what we're going to be doing here is we're not going to discuss the actual price that was paid by Keith's client a few months ago, because market conditions have changed. So what's important is how much would such an apartment cost now, so that it gives us a better understanding of what the market is right now. So Keith, can you tell us how much this apartment would be right now unrenovated? Because right now you're busy doing the renovation.
Yeah. Still in this neighborhood, we hope to get unrenovated properties for around $1,000 per square meter. Obviously, that's a big increase in the what the price was in Lira some months ago, 6 months ago, but still we're looking at $1,000 per square meter.
We'll discuss this in a bit, the recent price increases, because the market has changed quite a bit. So how many square meters is this apartment, roughly?
This is 90 square meters, 2-bedroom apartment, and the renovation cost for this would be about $300 per square meter. This is basically a complete gut job, except for the floors, which have been restored. Everything else has been gutted. Okay. And we're still just installing the kitchen and the washroom. I see there's going to be a bathtub there. That should be nice. Okay. And, it's just a nice, standard kind of property for us. This is very standard, but I think quite nice finish.
And this would qualify for the Turkish citizenship by investment program?
Yeah. This would qualify. If you were looking for citizenship, you'd have to be doing, at least 2 or 3 properties like this. Yeah. So these are, on the smaller side of the investment still. But in many ways, it represents a lot of the properties that we certainly did in the last year. Okay. Keith, thanks a lot for showing us the apartment. We're going to go into the yield calculation in a bit. But before you started touching on the topic of prices having increased over the last few months, because what's been happening is you've all seen the Lira has dropped substantially since last October. The country went through a bit of a currency crisis. Things are still not 100% stable, but it's gotten a bit better. But essentially what happened is a lot of foreigners have been coming to Istanbul hoping to get a good deal because of the devaluation. But what we're seeing in the market is actually the opposite. Prices in USD terms have gone up. So can you elaborate a bit on what you've been seeing? Yeah, that's right. At first it was a little bit surprising, but the number one thing that happened is a lot of sellers just withdrew from the market. So it's affected the supply of available properties. And people who are putting their properties on in these, downtown, reasonably good locations, reasonably central, are just pegging it to the dollar more or less. And I think even, in fact, the prices have gone up somewhat in USD. And I think people really are viewing the properties in terms of their value as safe haven during this turmoil. So it was a bit unexpected initially, but now when I think back, it makes a lot of sense. People want to be in property. Foreigners, of course, are buying here, but also locals really would prefer. Nobody wants a whack of Lira right now. So if they have a whack of Lira, they're looking to put it into property for sure. Makes sense. So it shows that real estate in Turkey is fulfilling its hard asset function, which is a positive. It also shows that there's probably not that much leverage in the system either.
Very few of these properties are supported by a big loan. There's a lot of cash involved. Of course, people supplement with a loan, but I don't see any over leverage occurring at all. It just doesn't really happen here.
So in many ways, it's interesting to see that inflation and currency devaluations are not impacting the prices of real estate here in Turkey. So imagine if, for example, in the West, we were to raise interest rates substantially, what we would see is the housing markets just crash. This here, the housing market has already crashed. It bottomed. Now it's a bit of an flux. It's trying to find itself because, as you're saying, its demand has gone up a little bit, but it's not necessarily a demand story that we're seeing here in Istanbul. It's mostly a lack of supply story. So there's a lack of supply. So is there the possibility that prices could correct a little bit as if the currency stays stable and people feel comfortable enough to sell, or do you see this as more permanent? I know it's very hard to tell, to predict.
Yeah, it's still early days, and if there is a correction, I think it'll take a bit more time. What I've been saying for the last couple of months is we need a period of stability before the market actually starts to function in a predictable and normal way. So are we just starting to get that with the stabilization of the lira? It seems a bit early to tell, but if it does indeed continue to stay stable for a couple of more months, I think that we'll see more people enter the market to sell their property as there's more visibility, and we'll see some normalization in the prices. So we'll see in the next couple of months. It's early days to say. I don't think that they'll go down very much, the prices from where they are now. There'll just be a little bit more options for the buyers coming in. I hope so, because we're anticipating a fairly busy spring, and it would be good if there were more sellers around. Right now it's tough.
Because that's been your number one challenge, is finding suitable properties.
Yeah, we have buyers. We have lots of buyers. But the properties that we're willing to sell are much less than they were 6 months ago or a year ago. When I compare to a year ago, it was really, we were lucky. There was a lot on the market. We were sometimes going and viewing 8, 10 properties a day. Now we're down to 1 or 2.
Yeah, so people who came in last year and bought a bunch of property through Keith on the secondary market did not only often got a free passport out of it, but they also made money and made some rental income in the meantime.
Yeah,
so those people did really well.
Yeah, I was really worried about that initially. So I went back and I performed, I guess you call them stress tests, to see where people were. And I thought, oh my, maybe they'll be underwater. In fact, that's not the case at all. People had actually eked out reasonable gains in USD terms as well, massive gains in Lira terms, but for what they're more concerned about the USD, still they were all above water, all in the profit, almost every property that we sold last year. So that's the good news. A little bit more challenging, maybe a bit more than a little bit more challenging for the new people coming in. We're still doing deals. It's just, it's slowed down for the time being.
Because at the end of the day, even if the deals are not as good as they used to be last year, the reality is $1,000 a square meter.
Yeah, that's still good.
In the center of a city of 15 million people in the heart, between Asia and Europe, especially now with everything that's going on in other countries. Turkey is a bit of a safe haven for people. The currency is definitely not a safe haven. But then you add the $300 per square meter for the full renovation, and for essentially this apartment is worth about $120,000 for 90 square meters, 2 bedrooms, fully renovated, in a good area in Istanbul. It's not that much money. If you go to Sofia in Bulgaria, for example, you'll be paying at least 2,000 euros a square meter for...
Tbilisi, the same story, Bucharest, you name it, you'd be looking at similar numbers. So to be able to get this for under $1,500 a square meter, we're about an 8-10 minute walk to the Osmanbey metro center, 12-14 minutes to Nişantaşı. It's still pretty good.
Yeah. Tbilisi, you can find similar prices in Tbilisi as long as you're not in the core area. But the issue with Tbilisi is that it's hard to find tenants,
Right.
which is absolutely not the case in Istanbul. On average, how long does it take you to find tenants for your...
The last 6 months to a year, it's been incredible. We put the properties up and they're rented, we're talking days rather than weeks. They're rented really super fast. Cool. You know, if we're putting the rents at a reasonable rate. I mean, we're mostly dealing in Lira for the rent, so we have to be a little bit careful of that. Some of the properties that we gave out to rent, say 6-9 months ago, are looking low, the yields now, of course, in USD terms, but you know, that was inevitable. Nobody knew what was coming. But now we're getting good rents again, okay. High rents, much higher. When I'm looking at them and saying, okay, let's put this out for rent, I'm starting up pretty high and we're getting it. It shows, and there's demand. If you have a renovated place again downtown, you can call your shots.
Cool. So how much rental income per month could one expect from this apartment?
I think you'd be looking at about 7,500 for this apartment.
Cool. So 7.5 times 12 divided by 1.8 million liras in Turkish liras. If we take the $120,000 in liras, it's a gross rental income of 5%. Yep. Then if we remove about 5% of vacancy, and that's being pretty kind when it just takes you a few days to find a tenant, 5% for maintenance, which is also relatively kind in the sense that it's been renovated.
These won't need much maintenance for years to come. Really.
Yeah. 10% for your property management, a bit of property tax, which is very low, 0.2% of typically a value much lower than you bought it for. And then local income tax, if you take just an average rate of 15% for local income tax, really depends on your own situation. This is not tax advice. You'd end up with a net rental yield of 3.3%, which is not bad. But you also need to take into account, as you mentioned, Keith, that as the currency slides, what happens is that you may start with 3.3% net, but towards the end of the year, your 12th month is potentially just 2.5%. And then you need to raise your rent again and you get to a higher yield again, and then it kind of goes down. So it's probably lower than the 3.3%, taking into account depreciation. I think you can probably get better yields on Airbnb. So I come here on a regular basis to Istanbul. I like to stay in Airbnbs, and I find that what I'm paying is surprisingly expensive compared to what I can pay in other European capital cities, for instance. So I can definitely see that it's possible to get net yields of 5-6% on Airbnb. And then the good thing with Airbnb is that you have pricing power. So as the currency depreciates, you just keep your prices fixed in dollar terms or in euro terms. So that's a nice hedge, a nice currency hedge. But it comes with a lot more complications in terms of management. Sometimes a few legal issues. You need to be willing to, negotiate potentially with your neighbors, etc. So it's not straightforward, but it's an option in many cases. Thank you very much, Keith. So if you're looking to buy real estate in Istanbul, or if you're looking to obtain citizenship here in Turkey by investing in real estate, Keith can help you by finding good value secondhand properties in Istanbul and also finding better developments than you will find if you went on the first page of Google. There is his email right below in the description, as well as a link with more information on his services. Keith, thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Great.